Go, Adisa. You're muted, Adisa.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to support this very important cause, the Deborah Youthon Wilson Foundation. The foundation was established in 2020, so 3 years ago. The foundation supports children in poverty. Its main objective is to ensure that every child without a parent will have access to reasonable education. This is a fundraiser event or program. It is our very first virtual fundraiser event, so please feel generous to support us in meeting our goal of raising $1,000 today, which all the funds will go to support children without living parents. These funds will also help send them to school and provide for their basic necessities while they're in school. You can support in many different ways. So you can support through the PayPal link that will be provided. I believe it's provided at the bottom of the link here. You can also send us stars if you're logged in through Facebook Live, as me, and electronic fund transfers are also accepted. So now I'll go into introducing our panelists today. Starting with Ni Tewa Connie. Ni is our oral historian, public speaker, community advocate, and publisher of the Nile Valley magazine and founder of the Africa Diaspora History Library here in Edmonton. And then next, we also have our Pastor Thomas Wilson. He is a theological educationist and the theological education by extension and the Royal Ambassador ministry intending to prepare boys for services and involvement in activities dependent on his passion for ministry. Okay, and then we have Mrs. Bridget Wilson. She is a philanthropist, advocate, counselor, and businesswoman dedicated to promoting justice, mental health, mental well-being, female entrepreneurship, and she is the founder and the CEO of the foundation. So now I'll welcome Bridget to come and provide us with more information on the foundation. She is one of the Deborah Wilson's daughter. She will come and tell us more about the foundation, why it was started, and the future goals of the foundation at this time. So Bridget Wilson, please give us more detail on the foundation.
Thank you, Adisa. I would like to start with an icebreaker, just to kind of like familiarize ourselves. I would like to know where everyone's tuning from, what is really great about your city. So maybe I will start with you, the host, Adisa. Can you tell me where you're tuning from? And I'm listening to your accent. That doesn't sound like a Liberian accent. So can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So I'm tuning in from Edmonton. I live in Edmonton. Edmonton is my city. And something iconic about Edmonton is the West Edmonton Mall. It's believed to be the biggest in Canada. It used to be the biggest.
So it appears that Etza, we apologize, but your screen was frozen there. But if I heard you well, hearing that you're from Edmonton, and something iconic about Edmonton is the world. I think it's the second largest mall now, the West Edmonton Mall. Was that it? Sorry, guys. I think Etza's screen is a little bit slow. Etza, if you're there and hearing me, can you tell me a little bit of where are you coming from? Are you Liberian? Okay, so we'll move on to Mr. Nee Tiwekane. Nee, can you tell us a little bit about where are you streaming in from and what is your background?
I'm screaming from Edmonton, Alberta. I'm a Ghanaian, and I've called Edmonton home for the past, I believe, 12 years. Um, as the host mentioned earlier, I'm an oral historian, publisher of the Nye Valley magazine, and of course, the Africa Library in Edmonton.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great to have you here, Nee. Thank you so much.
It's a
And we'll
pleasure.
move on to I heard the host introduce him as Pastor Thomas Wilson, even though his name says Thomas Wilson. But I too am very familiar with him. He's one of our pastors in our community. Pastor Thomas Wilson, I can speak to that. I know you're a Liberian, but can you tell us where you're streaming from? And tell me, which county are you from too?
Thank you, Sister Bridget. I'm Pastor Thomas Wilson. I do reside in Edmonton, Liberia, of course, with my family. I'm originally from Liberia, West Africa, and there's a county in Liberia called Maryland. I think it was named after the city Maryland in America, but it's in the southeastern part of Liberia. There where I hail from. So Edmonton is a very wonderful place to be. And I just love connecting with the people here. And of course, since I'm a church guy, I love doing some religious work, supporting people from that background. So thank you, Bridget. I'm so pleased to be on here today.
Thank you so much, Pastor Wilson. And our host, we sort of missed you there because your computer was freezing. But can you tell us which country are you from? Are you from Liberia? Are you from Ghana, Nigeria?
Yes, I'm from Uganda, and I've lived in Edmonton pretty much my whole life now. But I am from Uganda, and I live here with my family.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So it appears that we have a wide range of diversity, and this is what the Deborah Youthon Wilson Foundation is about, diversity among single parenthood. It's unfortunate that most of you never would have gotten to know Deborah Youthon Wilson. Deborah was a mother, a sister, a friend. She grew up in Maryland, the same county that Pastor Wilson is from. She's a Maryland girl. There's a small city in Maryland in Liberia we call Harper City. But in Maryland, there are some people we call sorry, Pastor Wilson, I don't want to get this history wrong, but I believe we have the Bush Gribble and the Seaside Gribble people. Deborah Youthon Wilson came from the Seaside Gribble people. There's a little stereotype there that says the Seaside people talk quite loud, but it wasn't the case of Deborah Youthon Wilson. She was a self-talker, very easygoing woman. Deborah was a single mom. As many of you would know the history of Liberia due to the civil unrest in Liberia, it left so many women and men alike as single parents. And when I speak about single parents, I'm going to be inclusive of men. Indeed, when we speak single parents, we tend to have this reflection only of women, which is not bad because statistics would prove that majority of single parents tend to be women. But after the war in Liberia, we had several single parents, and my mom was one of them. She had raised 4 children independently on her own. And I know there's like shared parenting and single parenting, and shared parenting is where you have the dad or the father who is supporting and helping to raise the children along with the mom. But when we talk about single parent, we're talking about a mom or a dad who is the full custodial parent of that child. In the case of Deborah Youthon Wilson, she was the full custodial parent who was primarily responsible for the day-to-day care for kids, decision making, including education, health, and just the overall well-being. My family moved to Canada in 2003, and we will have this great dream of Canada, the American dream, but unfortunately, that was not the case of our mom, Deborah Youthon Wilson. Deborah would die at age 42. And the first time I ever heard of the word deep drain thrombosis is when the doctor said this is the statistics of what killed your mom. And I had to go Google that. So what does deep word mean? Like, as a child then, right? You don't know what that fancy medical term is. Then I realized it's something called blood clot. We don't talk about it enough, but research shows that blood clot kills 75% of our population, especially in Canada where it's cold. Regardless, Deborah Youthon Wilson left behind 4 beautiful children, amazing children, starting with Emad Wilson, our sister Anel Wilson Cruz, and myself, included Bridget Beauty Wilson Cry, and our little sister Edith Dawn Richardson Wilson. Of course, without a parent, life can be quite a struggle, and I first-handedly experienced that struggle to navigate life on my own without a mom or having a dad by my side to guide me through as a young woman. So as a result of that, growing up, being established, I decided what a great way to honor my mom, but not just our mom, but to honor the experience or the experiences of single mothers out there who are struggling and doing things independently on their own, to establish a foundation to ensure that each child will have a reasonable access to education through the voluntary donation of sponsors, people like yourselves. So henceforth, the Deborah Youthon Wilson Foundation was established by my husband, my siblings, and I in 2020, and we did our first initial physical luncheon in Liberia. We visited the foster, I would say foster home, even though the term foster home will look a little different in Liberia as compared to Canada, but the foster homes, the orphanage homes, and that experience truly humbled me. And it gave me more reason to do this, to strive to ensure that every child who is an orphan or is in a single parent home will have access to education, because I know what education did for myself, and I know what education can do for the next child to come if we give our support to children in poverty. Thank you, Adisa. There's a beeping sound. Is somebody's car going off or something? Sorry, I just had to touch on that.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay. Thank you, Bridget,
Thank you,
for that
Bridget, for that wonderful
introduction on the
foundation
foundation
and providing
us more
information.
I'm really having a feedback.
So,
Bridget,
Bridget,
could you take over?
take over?
I can hear myself and it's lagging behind.
Absolutely. For sure. So on our binder today, there are a few questions that we have because, and I'm grateful we have some men on board. As I stated earlier on, when we talk about single parent family, we have this assumption that single parent family consists of only women, but there are men who, by virtue of experiences of themselves or of others, have had to experience or get to know what single parenting is like. So I'm going to open the discussion with some questions, and we can the host left me in charge of this, and I'm going to try my best to go through her questioning. Just a second, guys. Okay, there we go. I'm back. So I see, I'm just going off Edisa's note here, and I see she do have some questions. Can you tell us, Nee, because Nee, you are a father, you're a grandfather, you are a feminist, and I've had the honor of getting to know you. So can you tell me some of the daily challenges of a single parent home? What does that look like?
Thank you. Thank you very kindly, Bridget. I think that to dive into the question you're putting across, we need to understand that we are looking at single parenthood through the lens of the Black community. Because each community will have certain cultural principles that guide them at such situations when the family is being unprepared. So as African, how do we function as a single parent? I think that should be very clear. Because raising a child of Italian descent is different in the Italian community. Raising a child in the Jewish community is different. Raising a child from the Indian community is different. And so, as a Canadian, we understand that there are certain communities that have less issues in single parent or child delinquency or whatever issues you face. So I will give you 3 examples, and you can see that those communities are quite stable. And as I mentioned, is the Jewish community, is the Italian community, is the Indian community. And why is it so? Is the question that we have to wrestle with. So there's no blanket formula for how single parents function based upon what Canada is. It's a place where we are diverse cultures. And so Canada is the only country in the Western Hemisphere that has a multicultural ministry. In other words, Canada is not a melting pot. You come here and be yourself. So we are allowed to be Africans. You are allowed to be an Indian. You are allowed to be Jewish. And that is what brought this country together, that people run away from places where they are not allowed to have that freedom. And so I believe that as a parent, much of the issues that we face is because most Africans try to adopt to a Canadian or a much liberal approach to parenthood. And that have caused our communities quite a bit in terms of single parenthood homes with the youth growing up without sometimes father or sometimes mother. So what are the issues that is across the line? It doesn't matter what country of origin or what culture you come from. And that is when you interfere with the natural order. And the natural order means a mother and a father at the home. And that is when everything is in a state of equilibrium, like everything is balanced. So once it becomes unbalanced, and then there will be issues, because it's like being in an office and your colleague did not show up. And so you have to cover for your colleague. It means you have to double up. And so issues will begin to become quite intense, and the children will lose the contact with grandparents, the extended family system, And depending upon what the situation is prior to the divorce or death or any other of those circumstances. But if there are understanding of the separation, then I think the extended family system, which is what African system thrives on, the extended family system, we don't have what we do have here, which is social services. So the extended family is our social services, an uncle, an aunt. And as a Ghanaian, there is a proverb that says, "Ejebi hua, ejebi tias." It says, when an aunt dies, there's another aunt. When a father dies, there's another father. So in Africa, most of the cultures, we do not have names for aunt. Aunt is a mother. Uncle is a father. So this is what have allowed the African culture and tradition to thrive until quite recently. And so single mothers face issues because I believe wholeheartedly that we adopt to a culture that inherently is not part of us. And so our struggle is, how do we look back? In the Akan language, we say Sankofa. Let's go back and see the kind of things our grandfathers, our ancestors, how did they live and why they tried, whether there's money or there's no money. Because the spirit of Ubuntu determines that if I'm happy, we are all happy. So I live because you live. And that is the basic African principle that have brought Africans. So African strength is not about atomic bomb or how many military people we have. It's about the family. And so I submit to you that when you go to my hometown, Accra, you will see so many people. Come 8 o'clock, you will never see anybody sleeping on the roadside. What happens? Each person returns to a family. So the person may have mental issues, emotional issues, but the person knows some part of the city that the family dwells. Again, in the African tradition, we say, when you are in the crowd with a baby, a child, and the child points to a direction, it means there's a family member. And this is the African belief system, that a child hears the voice of a family member and she or he connects immediately. So I think that there is the need for us to look back to the traditional African family system that most people on this platform, I think we got a bit of that traditional upbringing. And this is why we are uniquely different. And this is why we can go through issues. This is why we can face difficulties, because we have been raised to face difficulties. We have been raised to solve problems. We have been raised to be strong in the face of adversity or adversity. So this is the African strength, and I am hoping that we can get back to basics and understand what the family is. I heard somebody say the church family. They've never been a church family. The family goes to the church. So the family wasn't created by the church. The family created the church. So the church will not be in the parenting business. The family is a family. And when we go to church together, that's when the church is good, because we come to church as a family. So we don't come lonely and come to the church and looking for family. No. So with that, I would like to give you the next person. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nee. That was such an amazing. I just love how you dissect the collective families of the African culture. Meanwhile, in the West, we have the individualistic aspect of the family system, and that doesn't really work for our family system. But I'm going to come back to you because I have a follow-up question. But in the meantime, I will come to you, Pastor Thomas Wilson. Can you tell us some of the challenges that single-parent family happen to deal with on a daily basis? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sis Bridget. And I don't know if I can pronounce the name right. It's Connie. Conde. I hope I got it right. But you said it right. I mean, cannot agree with you more than what you said. But firstly, I would like to look at some of the contributing factors, what some of the factors that lead to single parenthood. And if we are unable to handle uh, some of the factors, it will lead us down the road. One, I believe divorce can lead to single parenthood, abandonment, death, or separation. There may be a lot more out there, but these are just few I want to name. And if these separations are not handled in the way that it is professional, it clarifies all emotional doubts. There is a tendency that the single parent will live with some level of unearthed trauma. And when that is not dealt with, there is a possibility that it may lead to transfer aggression. For instance, in the situation of death, something that the man did not prepare for, the woman did not prepare for. It was tragic. It just swept them off their feet. This mother or this father has to deal with the situation surrounding the loss he or she has faced. And if that cannot be dealt with, the adverse effect will be terrible in terms of keeping the household. And this is just one of the things I want to look at. Second is the issue of decision making, because when one parent is gone, the one that is left carries other an added responsibility, and especially in most of our African culture, there are some rules that are attributed probably to the women, some rules that are attributed to the men. And if the one that is left is unable to handle that responsibility, there's a possibility that the house might be in chaos. Perhaps handling the finances, helping the children to meet some of the leisure responsibility, extra curriculum activities. If the mother or the father will have to decide between work and parenting, that that would be disastrous for the home. So, like the Pop said, if I can refer to you, Pop, would that be okay? Just for the lower respect. Like he said, uh, in our African society, in our African culture, he talks about, like, I think is one of the African theologians who said, I am because you are, and says you are, I am. I think it was John Mbiti. We don't feel that much because, like he said, there is no word for cousin, there is no word for aunt. The family covered up. But in this society, we find ourselves, like you talk about the individualistic form of parenting, is difficult. It's difficult because everyone try to care. Everyone try to care for his or her family. It is difficult to leave your family probably to try to mentor other people's family. And as the result, we send our children to other places. Like he said, the the system becomes uh, the 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 support family in the African sense, and we have no ideas what our children are bringing home, some of the ideas they are inculcating, some of the value system, and it affect the home greatly. We might be, we may be doing our best, but in some instances, it's not helping the family. But if I will just zero down on my point, is that the issue of decision making is very important in single parenting. If the right decisions are not made, it will lead to an adverse effect, especially on the children. And I would always like to encourage single parents. I don't know the factor that may have led to single parenthood. If it's traumatic, take care of yourself. Even in counseling, there is something we call counter transference. If the father left, abandoned the home, and that left some traces of emotional scars, there is a tendency that the mom will always be there, just like your father, or the father will be saying just like your mother, you know. Instead of talking about the issue, we talk to them about the issue. So I would say take care of yourself, seek help if you need the help. And the issue of decision making is so important because you will be carrying on some other responsibilities. And if you are not prepared for that, it will lead you to affecting your family in a negative way. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Pastor Wilson. So just back to you, Nee. Initially, you talked about going to the depending on the aunties, or I like to bring in men as well, not just women or the uncles, for that support system. So what about those families that don't have any form of support network to balance back on? Like, what do they do in instances that there are single parenthood, there are single parent mom, single parent dad, but there is no uncle, there is no auntie, especially in this in the diaspora, where our culture is very individualistic as opposed to collective. So what would you recommend that they can do in instances where there is no support network?
I think that when you talk about family, it is not only by DNA. I will submit to you that when you walk through any mall and you see a black person, when they are getting closer to you, there's electricity that connects the two of you. And I tell you that we are the only people on the planet Earth that every time you walk past a brother or a sister, you feel something. Whether you say hi or you nod your head, whatever, we show connection. That connection is vital. It is how we are inextricably woven together as a single tapestry. So we don't have to bring the extended family from Africa. We create the family here. And so when you heard about Africans in every continent, Asia, Europe, wherever, it is not the same family, but the same genetic code that dwells within every black person. So I can call the next man my brother. We are the only race that use the term brother. You will never see a white person call the next white person brother, never. We are the only people that calls every man brother, every girl sister. So the family tree has not broken, it's still there, that we can support each other. When we go to church, there are people from different families, they come, but we create family, right? So that family, that African family have never broken, have never been broken. The fact that you've left your mother or your uncle and being here by yourself. So what I'm trying to say is how we begin to rely on each other and say that, I live because you live. So I think those are some of the lessons that we need to be looking at. How do we bring the black family back? The soul brotherhood, that our ancestors have applied those techniques, that they are from each person and we all came from one black woman. So we are a family. And anyone on this platform can take me to any police station and say, that's my brother, or that's my uncle, or that's my grandfather. Nobody will challenge you. You understand what I'm saying? So what we are looking for outside of us is within us. All the help that we are looking for. Because if I have an issue with my wife and a social worker comes here who have gone to school here, have been trained in the what we call the Canadian culture, and he comes in and say, I'm sleeping in the next room and my wife is sleeping in the next room, to her, it's nothing. Then Mr. Nee, okay, go and sleep there, Mr. But in our culture, if your father calls you and you tell him that, Daddy, I'm sleeping in a different room, my husband is sleeping, your father knows there are issues. So sending a social worker from our community, we understand these cultural differences, and therefore we will be served better based on the African culture. Because when you go to the Jewish community, they have Jewish social services. In fact, the Italians who created Italian social services, because they don't want somebody to look at them through another lens. So what I can suggest to our community is that there is a need for us to create that family value, family strength, family togetherness, where every child call a grown-up woman aunt or mother, where everybody call another person like me uncle or grandfather. So these values are there to actually guide us, and I think we need to look into how we can go back to those kind of principles. So yes, single motherhood is a challenge, but I think they need our support, because when one Black child fails, we are failed.
And Nee, I'm hearing you say that parts of the solution is going back to the community. As in the term, we are all we are the village. It takes a village to raise a child. I'm also hearing you talk about the terms that we normally use within the African context, which is the aunties or uncles.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody will argue and say that such terms are instruments that perpetuate abuse. Because when the child will call somebody an auntie or an uncle, it creates an atmosphere of comfort. And that atmosphere can hence be contaminated if that auntie or that uncle tend to abuse the child, right? Because if I call you an uncle, that's a very trusting word. That if you come and knock my door, my kids will open because it's Uncle Nee. But if they understand that Uncle Nee is a community member, Uncle Nee is a friend, then they will establish some boundaries. So a lot of people, especially our modern day Africans, have issues with the term of calling unrelated, biologically related people aunties and uncles. Are there other terms that we can best use, like going back to traditions like elders?
Yes. Elders can play a role. Don't make the mistake. When you call people by what they do, it keeps them on their toes. So in Africa, if you are a teacher and your name is Jane, nobody will call you Jane. They call you teacher. So constantly, you are not only a teacher in the classroom, you are a teacher wherever you may be. The same thing with pastors. You may have a name, but once you become a pastor, everybody calls you pastor. So pastors are all constantly being on their toes, because we call you pastor. So there's certain behavior that we expect from you. The same thing if you are a police officer, if you are a social, whatever you do. So Africa, we tend to call people based upon what they do. Because if somebody is calling you an uncle, in other words, that person can trust you, so that when you have emotional issue, he can come and call you. I have, young people call me 2:00 in the night. They say, Mr. Nee, I went to do my paper, this is it, and I will talk to them. But when they call me, the first word will be Uncle Nee. So that puts some kind of responsibility on my shoulder. So the issue of abuse should not be licensed for us to separate from our uncles and aunts. Abuse can come from any angle. And sometimes we also have to identify what is an abuse in one culture is not abuse in the other culture. I submit to you, when I came here 55 years ago, the legal age to get married was 21. Okay, so if you marry somebody that less than that, it's a crime. Now they brought it to 18. Now we are debating to bring it to 16. So, and there are cultures in African culture that people have been married to when they were 17 or 18. And we have certain values that if you allow people to be 21, 23, 24 before they get married, they may have boyfriends, they will run through so many men, and by the time they get married, they're comparing every man to their husband. So the African family is coming from this angle, that it's not about letting them finish university or finish their masters and then get married. Can you guarantee that it's not good? It's not going to have a boyfriend or anybody? No.
Nee, do I have your permission to interject there? Given that single parent home or homes are very vulnerable, so there is a need to protect that space. Inviting or the community in to help support, whether it is babysitting the child or rendering some type of tutoring supports. Like, what would you say are some of the protective barriers that they can put in place to ensure that the children are safe in accessing the help of the community? Because yes, we are a community, but we have seen where single parent home has been exposed or left vulnerable, that people will come in and abuse a child. And when I say abuse, I'm speaking generally, but I would like to be precise to talk about things like sexual abuse, physical discipline, right? Because there is this thing in Africa where it says that everybody can discipline everybody's child, but we don't put a limit to what extent can we do that. We don't talk about that enough. So again, where there's a single parent household and a struggling mom or a struggling dad who has to work and they're looking for someone to care for their kids, they can be very vulnerable to or susceptible to predators. So how then can they protect? Because no one walks around with a badge on them stating that, oh yeah, I am a predator, I am a child abuser. They don't. So then you have to use discernment and some level of caution. So what would you say would be your way forward? Well, Pastor Wilson, feel free to maybe I will a little bit. Pastor Wilson, please come in.
Thank you. Well, St. Richard, abuse is everywhere. It's not just limited to single parenthood. Even people with living in a wholesome family still face abuse. For me, I just want single parents to live the values that they want the children to live. And that's the beginning. What values are you inculcating in your children? And you talk about people accessing the home where they are susceptible. Do you follow what your children look at on the internet? Quite recently in the brother, I think, Edmonton, there was a girl who was lured from the house. And when they found her, she was in the United States. Some predator was able to lure her just by the access of the internet. And so the uncle may not come home, the uncle may not come by the house, the aunt, the cousins. But what are they watching? They are sexually abusing their own minds. The internet, what are you teaching them? And so I would say we just need to live out the values that we want in our children. If you are a single parent, for instance, no respect to our females, and you want your child to be decent, how do you dress? Where do you take them? Do you take them to adult clubbing, parties, where they should be home, exposing them to some dangers? It begins with you. It's not just the uncle. If we talk about abuse, I mean, rarely do we hear about things that go on in the society back home. It do happen. I don't want to say they do not. Some of them are swept under the carpet, of course. But the issue of trust is ingrained in our cultural values. Like Pani said, when you call me pastor, it's not just trying to portray who I am. It reminds me of my responsibility.
Exactly. Thank you.
It reminds me exactly every time I appear. And Richard says, Richard, you introduce me as a pastor. I'm cautioned. That means there's another added responsibility. So in our traditional setting, if you call this man an uncle, it means he has inherited some cultural responsibility. He's not just obligated to himself, but he obligated to portray that value. So it's more than just an uncle. It's not just a name, but it's a position the person holds within the cultural context. Uh, I, I had let me just zero in this point, then I will give it to Mr. Neil. Like we talk about Maryland, I had one of my uncle who was on his way to Maryland, of course, and I wanted to send something by him for my aunt. So it was late in the evening, got home, wore a short trouser, and took a taxi and went to Youthon. And I knew my way out. It was down the bridge, the beach. I forgot the place, the name. But
Is it around Point Four Junction?
I was before and I went all the way down to Popo Beach area.
Bone Mines Bridge?
Yes, no, the
Okay.
Popo Beach area. And
Okay.
I wore a short trouser with slippers. And Youthon, going between those horses. And I was shocked when one of my members came out and said, Pastor, what are you doing here with short trousers? You know, it's not just, the implication. It mean I was wearing a short trouser, probably I just came from someone's house, someone else's house or someone's room, and I was outside. And the idea they called me pastor, everyone was around. Oh, pastor, what are you doing here with short trousers? So the best I could say to the person that you and your brother come with me and let's just go to Popo Beach right there. And they went with me and I delivered the item. They came with me, put me in the taxi. And I said, that's what I came for. But the idea is the name. Just the name alone is a guide for our children. And sometimes when you appear to occasion and Mr. New is there or Pani is there, just the respect. Some things I can say, some things I can do, But again, when we come to this culture, we forget about our cultural values. We forget about who we are. Seldom do we even speak to our kids in our local vernacular. Rarely talk to them about our cultural outbringing. Don't talk about the story. And we leave everything to the society to train up our children. But to your point, Sis Preacher, we, I mean, the tenets of sexual abuse is already in our homes, just by the children holding the gadgets in their hands.
Hmm.
That's
Wow.
it. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you there, Pastor Wilson. So I know people are watching from everywhere. I just want to touch base on a little bit of why we're here. We're broadcasting from Focus on Liberia. This is the Deborah Youthon Wilson Foundation with a team discussion, making sure that every child in poverty gets a reasonable education. The Deborah Youthon Wilson Foundation was founded in the name of course, my mother. And this is in honor of the experiences of every single mother out there. So the topic tonight is on various discussion on the challenges faced by single parents. And we have great men here who are engaging in this discussion. And I have to say, guys, it's amazing to see men who are open to having such a discussion. Because again, when we talk about single parenthood, it is the tendency for people to project that, oh, it has to be a female. Well, a single parent can be either male or a female. So thank you for being here tonight. Again, it's a fundraiser. So the PayPal account is there. Feel free to drop whatever voluntary contributions to the organization to ensure, again, that each child gets a reasonable education. So this brings us to our next question. And Pastor Wilson, when you were talking, I kind of smirked there a little bit because you were diving into our second question for the night. I'm like, hold on to that because we will need it later. And our second question is on intentional parenting as a single parent. So intentional parenting is a word that I coined, but I'm sure it's out there already. It's parenting, but it's a different type of parenting. It's parenting with intentions. And how can we do that in the single parent household? It's open, guys. Back to you, Nee.
Well, intentional means, I don't know if I'm familiar with the word as it applies to single parenthood. Intentional means deliberate, purpose, mindful of what you are doing while raising the children, all kind of things. Intentional also means that somebody who have chosen to be a single parent. And so, he goes out there and make a baby, but you want to have a child, but you don't want to get married. So intentional can be all those things, but intentional is much better environment than the toxic environment usually that occurs during separation from a man from his wife. And so intentional would be a lot better to deal with because you have the intent to do good, the intent to raise the child properly, the intent to nurture the child. So I think that is a much better environment and much better approach if it is intentional. In other words, when you get to accept the responsibility that I must play the dual role, and therefore I'm going to do my very best. You are different from a toxic relationship that will cause a broken marriage, where one parent is using the children to punish the next parent, and the children pay a higher price. So I think if there's any lessons for us to learn, I personally, looking at this approach you are talking about, the intentional or the intense approach. That's what I want to ask you. Is it the intention to?
I'm looking at intentional in the context of parenting. So that will be two words that goes together: intentional parenting. So when we parent, as a background, as a counselor and a social worker, when we talk about parenting, we talk about meeting the needs of the kids. So that need is the physical, the emotional, the psychological, and the holistic need of the child. Now that can look like various things. It can look like shelter. It can look like food. It can look like sending kids to school, which is just the basic. But when I look at intentional parenting, I'm looking at beyond, like going beyond the minimum. You see, there's a lamppost, and where the lamppost stands is where the light reflects. But there are so many things that goes behind the lamppost where the light doesn't shine. Now, people tend to focus on just where the light is. And in parenting, what the light is are the kids eating? Yes, they are. Do they have a roof over their head? They do. Do they have clothes to wear? They do. Are they going to school? They do. We rest our case. But going beyond the lamppost would mean taking another step further. And that's where the intentions comes in. Because intentional parenting in my own perspective, would mean driving the trajectory of the child's future. So you're not just parenting to meet those basic needs, but you're asking yourself, why do you do what you do? What type of child do you hope to raise? Pastor Wilson mentioned out there that predators just don't come onto kids. It starts from in the home. It starts with parents taking kids to parties that should otherwise be adult parties. It starts with women dressing up little girls in a very explicit way that's sending out a very sexual message to these predators. So again, intentional parenting will say, why do I do what I do? So when you're addressing that child, you will ask yourself, what type of messaging am I sending out there? When you are in the home, what type of music are they listening to? When you put the television on, what type of shows they are watching? When you say go to your room, you're taking 2 minutes later to go to that bedroom, knock on the door, check in to see what they are doing when they are alone. When your child requests sleepovers with other people's children, you're doing some background check on the families. You're ensuring that the child that they're going to have sleepovers is exhibiting some proper behaviors that would not otherwise project on your child. Because the Bible says, and Pastor Wilson here, thank you, we'll have a pastor on board, that bad association spoils useful habits. So intentional parenting will mean going an extra mile. It's even checking the books that they read. What are they reading? What are you hoping that they will learn from what they read? I gave an example. Growing up, I read Snow White. I read Rapunzel. and my logic could not process why would a girl throw her hair down for a guy to climb on it? Would she still be alive if that to happen in real life, right? So that wasn't checked. What was I really?
And especially when nobody's
and the guy is climbing up the window when nobody is home. So that was the messaging that I was getting from this storybook. Had that storybook been replaced with an educational book, I could have learned something a lot more beneficial to my upbringing as opposed to a girl throwing her hair down, and we call the storybook Rapunzel. So intentional parenting again is going beyond the I don't want to say lazy parenting, because the easy parenting will be if the child requests a tablet. Oh, here's the tablet, because we want them to calm down, right? So they're not making any more noise in our ears. But then we do not follow up to see what they are exploring on those tablets. So intentional parenting, especially in the context of a single parent, I find is so important, because one, whatsoever happens with that child, be it good or bad, you take full responsibility of it. So again, I'm just looking at intentional parenting in the context of why do you do what you do? Sorry, please.
That is well said. I'm beginning to like the idea of intentional parenthood. Because the intent to do good supersedes every other intent. And if your intention is to do good, it also means that if you do not like the woman you marry again, or you do not like the man you married again, the respect for the life of the child supersedes everything else. So you will have the respect that I no longer love this man, but for the purpose of my child growing up well and having support from both parents, I must make the provisions for the woman to visit the child, vis-a-vis for the man to visit the child, to play a role in their life. Because I believe that all the statistics shows that children raised in a two-parents home always comes on top. And so that is something that is proven. Now, that is not to say that single mothers can raise children. They do. But anytime you are fighting the natural order, there is something that goes wrong. Then the natural order is to have two people. So when there's one person, it means that you are stretching yourself. And that stretch takes a toll not only on the children, but also to the mother, because she doesn't get a break. She comes home, she's tired, she has to cook, she has to make sure clothing are ready, she has to help them with the homework. And this task can be shared by the parent, the mother, and the father. So yes, I think what I would do, or what I would like us to do, is to begin to actually focus on the family, because if a community doesn't have a family, it's not a community. And our community, we don't have a family, so we are not a community. So when we talk about the community, they have the Chinese community, they have the Indian community. And when you see them, in fact, every time I go to the mall, I feel sad. My sadness is based that when you see Black youth, they are always by themselves. The other groups, like the Indians, when you see them, they're always in pairs.
And Nate, please, before you go further, I want you to stay with that thought, because you said something very important. I'm hearing intentional parenting, but I'm also hearing it can be seen in the context of shared parenting. And I really like that you brought that up, because as a counselor and again a social worker, I've had the opportunity to speak with men and women in a professional experience and in an individual capacity. And what I like to bring forward, if the other parent is healthy and they're stable, there should be no reason why a child or the children are denied access to the other parent. And again, that's another part of intentional parenting, because it's such a broad term. It can be looked at from several different angles. And Pastor Wilson, please feel free to jump in, because I really like where Neve is going with this. Intentional parenting in the capacity of shared parenting, because our kids, they need both representation of their parents in order to grow as a whole being. To grow in a holistic way that will be healthy for them developmentally, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. So, Pastor Wilson, please jump in.
Yeah, I think on the onset, I said something about parenting factors that lead to. I said, Richard, please mute your mic.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I said something about factors that may lead to single parenthood, and if at all the breakup is traumatic, leaving one partner with some emotional scars, there is a tendency to look at the other partner as not being good at all. Maybe the man may place a stigma on the woman, or the woman may place a stigma on the man. So in this instance, a parent may advocate for full custody and not allowing this other parent coming in. I mean, with the right intention. But I love the word intention, intentionality. It's a design. For me, it's like a conscious design with purpose. When you talk about you must be intentional, it's a design with purpose. When you have a purpose, it's a bigger picture. It's like a vision. And in order for you to accomplish that purpose, you must begin the mission, how the strategy, how will you accomplish that? That's how intentional parenting is. For instance, separation is always not a good thing. It's not a good thing. The first thing that comes to mind is that I don't want my child or my children to endure what I'm going through. So you become intentional about setting them on the use the word the right trajectory so that they can succeed. I don't want my children to end up being a failure. I don't want them to go through the emotion that are underwent. So at the result, you try to create a design and a picture in your mind on how I will help my children out of this situation. The first thing is that you need to take your own emotion out of the picture. Take yourself out of the picture. You need to be as vulnerable as possible. It begins with that. If you want the ultimate good for your child. And with this, you need to see your the partner or farmer with the good intent. I mean, quote unquote. You need to explore every avenue about whereby you can support your children. But intentionality is so important because it gives you a sense of self-awareness. When you want to be intentional, you have to put everything on the table. You have to examine yourself. It begins with you. Because if you're not prepared, like when I was learning computer, it said garbage in, garbage out. That's why you put out. You got to be intentional about what you want. And not just being intentional, you must live the values that you want your children to espouse. Those basic values.
Wow,
That
Pastor Wilson,
I'm a
I'm hearing
theologian.
live the value. Sorry,
Yeah,
go
I'm
ahead.
a
I just have a little
theologian.
insight there.
I think Mr. Neil will agree with me since I come from the pastoral background. And in St. John chapter 6, when Jesus was in need of feeding, he was in need of finding something to feed the 5,000. One of the disciples said that there is a young man here with 5 loaves and 2 fish. With 5 loaves and what? 2 fish. He was sent, his parents sent him, or probably his parents were there, but they gave him something that he took within the word. So most of the time we want to parent our children, we want to look at bigger picture, we want to look at the celebrities, we want to know, what do you have? What can you give? It begins with you. What can you give? The 5 loaves and 2 fish you're going to place in their hand. The word will use that to benefit. You on the phone, someone calls you. You take the phone and give the phone to your daughter or your son. Tell the person, I'm not here. But yet, you want your child to be the most perfect person in the world. Everything in the world, in the house is curse words. But you want your child to be sanctimonious, the most perfect person when you take them out there. What you're doing is that you are depositing a negative value system within the subconscious, and those will be on earth when they go into the world. So being intentional is being vulnerable, is knowing where you are, what you have, and what you can give. And if it is not within your domain, if it's not within your value system, go and find it. Go and find it. That's what leadership is about. Go find the right skills, the right tools, the right environment to help your children. But intentionality is a design that begins with you in your mind. Where am I going? What do I want my children to be in the next 2 years, in the next 4 years, in the next 5 years? And if you are not living those values, you're not ready. You're just taking a walk. And like John Maxwell said, no one is following you. You think you got people following you, but when you look behind, you're just taking a walk. So it's so important. Let's be intentional about what we want. Intentional in our deeds, intentional in our thoughts, intentional in our value, having good conversation with our children. It's not wrong if you're broke, let your child know that you are broke. Let your child know that you are broke. If you can't afford the extra today, don't be fake. Let your child know that you cannot afford the extra. That there be some lows sometimes.
Pastor Wilson, would you also say that intentional parenting can play out in the context of culture?
Oh yeah. It's always.
How we introduce our culture to our kids and ethics.
I'm myself guilty.
Okay, so I will let you hold on to that point, and I will throw that question at me.
So much. I ain't gonna go in the office.
Me being
I'm
a
not
working
passing back
parent.
to home because we're busy in the society trying to catch us on other things and pay the bills and what have you. So we've been constrained by society and the system. And some of us come from enriched, cultural values, the cultural backgrounds, what it means to respect the old people, what it means to be a child, what it means to be submissive, are we imparting those things onto the next generation? It's just one
Absolutely.
to say that I'm from Liberia, I'm from Maryland County, I'm from this place, I'm from that place. 10 years from now, how are we living the society? I think there's a need to talk about system, how many African cultural centers do we have? How many? I mean, the Ghanaians. I'm gonna tell you, I lived in Ghana for 6 years as a refugee, and I went to school in Ghana.
Hmm.
I lived in Kumasi in the Boak.
Okay.
I interacted with a lot of Ghanaians when I went to school. I came to the United States and met Ghanaians. The Ghanaians can try. Every Ghana child that is born here knows. Every child knows Akwaba,
Yeah.
or Yamia Don. They know some level of the culture. That's what we're saying. That's being intentional. And that Mr. Nee was talking about the Akwaba is not just how we look at it. It doesn't have an equivalent probably in the English language. It's rich in the culture. So, my sister, are we intentional about passing some of those values? That's the whole essence of our education. Yeah, a few days ago, I was just thinking about life, and I said, now I'm beginning to understand why Solomon said everything is vanity. The whole essence of life is, what am I doing to help somebody? When we were young, we talk about the degrees. I just said, Bridget, you got 2 or 3 under your beds. Talk about the big houses, riding the big cars, but we are getting there. You know, is that life? No. So what are we doing? I mean, we have to leave empty. We have to deposit those values into the generation to move on. You think God wants those degrees in heaven? No, God doesn't. So to answer your question, our we need to be intentional in terms of our system or culture and what we teach our children, what we are passing on.
Thank you, Pastor Wilson. I really like how you dissected the question and things to me as well. We will be wrapping up in like 15 minutes because we have another segment of the program coming up on September 30th. We'll be back on here and we'll have more panelists joining us from different countries as well. And just to remind anyone, if you're just tuning in, please note that we're broadcasting from Focus on Liberia. This is the Deborah Youthon Wilson Foundation discussion panel with the team, making sure that each child gets a reasonable education. And that's another way that we can impact value and ethics, moral standards into kids. Because when we educate one child, we're educating a nation. So we're very big on giving. My mom was a very big giver, Pastor Wilson. That was what she was known for. Deborah was known for giving. She will give you the clothes off her. If you tell her like this blouse looks beautiful, she'll ask you, do you want it? You want it? I can change it right now and give it to you. She was very, very huge on giving, and that's one of the legacies that she left behind. So the PayPal account is there for anyone who wish to be a blessing to the organization. Please go ahead and donate voluntarily. With that, hopefully 15 minutes is enough to wrap up this question, but it's not really a question, but more of how can we create as a community, as individuals, as businesses, as organizations, how can we create equity for single parents family? Now, when I talk about equity, I like to describe it in a way, picture two people standing by a fence. One is very tall. He can look above the fence and see the soccer game happening. He has a good view. And then the other is very short. Now he's jumping and trying to watch the game across the fence, but he can't see it. But it's not his fault, right? Because it is by law of nature that we're all not going to be equal in all capacities. So nature had it that he's short, the other man is tall. But what can we do to create equity? We can put some blocks underneath the short man, and once we build enough block and raise him to the same height or equal height of the next man, and he will be able to watch the game. So I look at equity with that analogy in mind, that we understand that all families will not be the same. And single parent family has the most struggle. Financial struggle is huge with single parent families. So how then can we as communities, as individuals, as organizations, as businesses create equity for single parent families?
I think Ali will continue. He started off on the I said in Bluetooth. Yeah. I think he didn't go deep into that. He didn't delve as much as I anticipated. So
thank you, Pastor Wilson. So we throw that question at Mr. Nee.
I want his counsel today.
I think when you mention the word equity, it's one of the sickness within our community. So it's how do we create equity when you reference single parenthood, something like money, time, and the child raising concerns, which is the three things that single parents, mother or father, have to deal with. But there's always the shortage of time and the shortage of money and plenty of, raising the child. So there are some things that I've learned, and I always reference Jewish people because I live for a while in New York City, Hamilton Terrace, completely Jewish. I work for Jewish organizations, and I love their simplicity and the child raising formula, where you will see them use the most common running shoes or T-shirts or what have you. And so equity is something that we have to deal with within our community. How do we teach children, or how do we learn to put things away? So if my son is 15 years old working at McDonald's and I say put $10 away every week, and for the next 40 years, $10 a week. So by the time you hit 40, you are already a rich person. So these are some of the things. And then the next thing will be housing, real estate, you call it. How to invest in these things. And these are not hard-fetched behaviors or ventures. We can do this very easily. But then we have to instill in the youth about the financial responsibility. And I always tell people that when you hear the word economics, it's not just science, it's social science. So economics is how people live a better life with the little that they have. In Africa, we call it microeconomics. And so you see a single mother selling something at the market, whether it is onions or pepper, and this same woman will be able to send his child to college and to university because they've learned the act of putting a little bit away. So even when the man say we are broke, the woman knows that there's some money they can tap into. And this plays out in Africa. In where I come from in Ghana, most people in my tribe went to college or university because of the women managing this microeconomics. So it's an important area that we need to look into. We don't just have to be so educated, we also have to be financially stable. So it's not just about education, because I believe if it is education, the African community around the world are the most educated. We beat every group hands down. Then the question is, how can we beat everybody? We are the most educated. How can we can have a stable community, a stable family, a financially stable community? How come? So what is our education doing for us is the question we must ask. And that is the thing that we are wrestling with. We got so much education, yet our families are broken down, our communities are broken down. There are more young black boys in prison than anybody else. So tell me, define to me education. Education is knowledge, and that knowledge might help you to live a better life. So if your knowledge is not helping you to live a better life, then your knowledge is questionable. So in the African system, for you to go to a university, there's something we call motto, M-O-T-T-O. And I think most colleges in Africa have a motto, whatever high school you go to. My high school motto is a non-scholar sed vitae discimus. It means that we learn not for school, but for life. So we must be able to have the conversations. What is the education doing for us? And finally, when you go to a university or college in ancient Egypt, the motto at the entrance says, "Man, know thyself." So it means that the base of knowledge is self-knowledge. So if you don't have self-knowledge, any knowledge else you get is foreign. And so it says that you are like a donkey in the hot desert sun, carrying an encyclopedic amount of knowledge on your back, but none is relevant to your well-being. And that's Africans.
Wow. Well, really, I just need to take just 1 minute. You talk about.
So let me conclude here and sign off. My young pastor and my daughter Bridget, conversations like this are vital to building a community. We are not talking enough, and I think we must have this conversation, bringing different people from different walks of life to deal with the issues that we are facing. And there are two things that determines the future of a community, of a people. Two things: how well we look after our children, our youth, and how well we look after the elderly. Any community you go to who looks after these two groups, that community is going somewhere.
Wow, I would like to take that as our closing statement for tonight. Pastor
Yes.
Wilson, do you have anything to add before we conclude the segment for tonight?
Yes, Richard, thank you. Please mute your microphone. Getting off feedback. Thank you, Mr. Neil. The only thing I have to say is that since Richard, what you're involved with now is the system you are creating, the system of equity, the system of empowerment, helping our people to look beyond their own comfort. Just the mere fact that you have taken this initiative to care for people in Africa who may not have access to the system you have here. You just an answer to the question, and I just want to appreciate you and applaud your efforts. You could sit here and enjoy the comfort of life. The children who have 3 square meals, but you're looking at other children who cannot afford, and that's the whole essence of life. And I just want to admonish you. Actually, about a year ago, I reach out to you and some other people in the community. I received a letter from a young lady who was diagnosed with cancer in her uterus. She was working as a nurse, couldn't afford. She reached out to me. I never had the means, and I reached out to the community. And Bridges was one of the sisters who came out to support the cause of that young lady. So, and today she went to Ghana for. She was there for about 3 months undergoing the treatment, and she's doing extremely well. See the value we have added to her life. She cannot stop thanking the people whom she haven't seen, people she haven't met. So that's what we want to do, Bridget. You have answered the question. Dr. Martin Luther King said, life most urgent and persistent question is, what am I doing to help somebody? So thank you. I will just end on this note. The system will not work with people who work the system. And it begins with us. There are some of our brothers and sisters who've been great to this country, just trying to navigate their way. Catching the bus is a problem for them. Going to get their ID is a problem for them. Doing this is a problem for them. All they need is just to help them with the system, to help them navigate the system that will bring their own path. Let us not leave them behind. Thank you, Bridget. At least you have the mind not to leave a child behind. And look forward to our next panel discussion. And I hope Mr. Nee will be there. I look forward to gleaning from his wealth of knowledge. God bless you.
And this concludes us for the night. I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists, me, Tiwer Cunning, Pastor Wilson, and Adisa, our host, who opened up the program, and the crew or the team of Focus on Liberia, Dennis, Jerome, and Asani. We just want to say thank you to you all. We will be back here September 30th with another panel discussion. And again, this is the Deborah Youthon Wilson Foundation, making sure that each child in poverty gets a reasonable education. The PayPal link is there. Feel free to voluntarily contribute. Until then, we just want to say thank you to everyone for joining the live feed tonight. Thank you, guys, and you have a great weekend.
Liberia is our